In order to understand how to use the two color bars in Embroidery Magic 2, we need to know how and why they were developed in the way they were. The vertical color bar represents 15 needles on a commercial embroidery machine. When Embroidery Magic 2 was first developed, the average commercial machine had 12 needles. So at the beginning, Embroidery Magic 2 was also limited to 12 colors. But today, commercial embroidery machines have 15 colors, so we now have 15 different color choices to be used in Embroidery Magic 2. The horizontal color bar at the bottom of your screen represents the actual number of colors in your design and the order in which they are stitched. So for this lettering design, the first two lines of lettering were digitized first, and they are represented by color number 1 in the vertical color bar. The next line of lettering was created with red, and it is represented by number 2 in the vertical color bar. The third one was digitized third, and it was digitized with number 3 in the vertical color bar. Now I can change any of these colors at any time. For example, if I wanted to stitch this design and I wanted to change color 3 to green, I can make sure number 3 is selected. I can choose the color bar at the top, and I can then select any shade of green that I would want to use for that lettering, and the lettering changes because all of the stitches that are created, as long as number 3 is selected, will always be represented by the color that is represented in that box as well. So you can change these colors at any time, but if there are no stitches represented with it, nothing is going to change within the design screen. I can change this number 10 and I can make it purple, but nothing is going to change on the design screen because there are no stitches associated with it. Let's look at a design that was created in Embroidery Magic 2. This design is a paint palette, and it represents quite a few different colors that would be used on an actual artist's paint palette. I prefer to look at my designs with the points display selected because it gives me a more defined look for the design. So we're going to make that change in the display area at the top menu bar. Notice that my color choices are brown to represent the color palette itself, and then 3 of the different colors of paint, and then it switches. The next color is the color of the brush itself, then the handle on the brush, and then red, which is actually being used for the lettering, a little bit of paint on the brush, and then the actual glob of paint on the palette. If I wanted to change the order of my colors, there are a couple of ways that I can do this. Initially, I can select any color in my horizontal color bar by holding down the Shift key, and then I can select that color. For this case, I will select purple. A box forms around it, and I can release the Shift key on the keyboard. Notice that when something is selected on the design screen, the editing bar becomes available to you. The two tools that we are going to use in the editing toolbar are Sew Before Previous Object and Sew After Next Object. Let's say that we want the purple to stitch before the green. All we have to do is select Sew Before Previous Object, and as soon as we have selected it, the purple moves so that it is now going to be stitching first. That color change is not reflected here, but it is reflected here. And when you save this design, the purple will be stitching before the green. In this case, that wouldn't make a lot of difference because one item is not on top of another item, as it is in so many designs. For example, in this design, I wanted the shell to stitch first and then the bottom of the mermaid to stitch on top of it. Notice that the shell is color 1 and the bottom of the mermaid is number 2. That is also reflected in the horizontal color bar. It would not make sense to stitch her bikini before I stitched the flesh of her arm, her body, and her head. So the color order is determined by how I want those colors to be represented for scale and proportion on my design. That's why it is important when you begin a design to write down the color order. Then, as you create your design, you're setting sections on top of other sections so that it makes sense when you are considering the perspective of the artwork. The same thing is true with this design. I needed to digitize the palette because I wanted the brush to be on top of it. And because I wanted the handle to cover the ends of the actual brush, the brush had to be digitized before the handle. And of course, the red paint on the brushes had to come after the brush. That's why the color order would be the brush, the handle, and then the red. And all of that would come after the palette. If you are opening a design that someone else has digitized and you want to change the order of the colors, just be aware that quite often the digitizer had a reason for doing the design in the order that she did. In this case, it wouldn't make any difference if you held down the Shift key, selected the red, and had it stitch before the blue. But it would make a difference if you had the red stitch before the tan, because then the red stitches for the brush would be underneath that brush. So make sure that you are careful about using this feature of changing colors in your Embroidery Magic 2 program. If you need more help with learning how to use Embroidery Magic 2, go to Yahoo Groups and look for the group called eMagic 2. I am the moderator there, and I am more than happy to answer any question you might have for how to use your program.